everyone. Welcome to this episode of Behind the Pulse. Today, I'm super excited to be talking to Amber Gaston, who has done a lot of really interesting work in the music industry, specifically with music management and some A&R work. Amber, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. I'm excited to kind of get into some details of what you're doing in your career because it sounds like from the first time we spoke, you kind of are doing a really interesting things from the ground up and doing a lot of work with smaller artists and some niche markets that I think you're kind of pursuing that are going to be a lot more popular in the future. And you're kind of like ahead of the curve on a lot of that.
Definitely.
And I feel like first we should kind of start with how you got into the music industry and what drew you to establish a career within the music industry.
I was actually an artist. I've been singing all my life, and I recorded my first like legitimate song when I was 16 years old, which allowed me to meet a local music producer at his own recording studio. And, we've just been working together ever since then. And, when I was younger, I didn't really understand the industry or understand how things worked. But as I got older and started to gain more knowledge, I'm like, hey, I can actually do something with this. I don't necessarily need to be signed to a label to do so. And so when I graduated college, I have a degree in biology, but I was like, I hate biology. So I'm going to make it happen with my music. It doesn't matter if I have a degree. I took one intro to music industry course and I was like, I'm going to start my own label and just make it happen. So after graduating school, my longtime producer and I, we officially started our own recording label, but I was really handling like the admin stuff, and I was just wondering like how do these labels and companies run their businesses? And I just literally prayed, and I asked God, I was like, God, can you please show me like how these businesses are run? Because like, I can read books on the music industry, but I still don't know how to run a business and how they operate and different things like that. So literally, my career has just been a pathway on showing me how these businesses operate. Like I ended up after a little while, I was like, okay, maybe I need to work for another company so I can learn. So I landed a position as an A&R at a music publishing company in New Jersey. And then from there, being that it was a smaller company, I was really able to see behind the scenes and what all you have to do. Then I had an internship at a local internet radio station. That was actually what I had first, the internship. Then I worked at the publishing company. Then from the publishing company, I'm working at a record label. It is an independent record label. And being that, again, it's a smaller company, I really have a bird's eye view and can see kind of what each department is doing and how all the pieces together. So I've been really lucky in that regard. And now, it's been several years I've been on the business side.
Oh, yeah, that's really interesting that you kind of had that approach while making music of like kind of starting from the ground up, doing your own thing that kind of
Mhm.
led you into the administration side and
Mhm.
then kind of into the AR work. Can you talk a little bit about that before we move on and why that's valuable to have that kind of mindset of ground up, kind of the small details first before growing a big empire?
I think that's important because if you start from the ground up and you learn the basics, you learn how everything works, then it makes it less likely that somebody can screw you over, if I'm just being honest. Like when it comes to starting your own business, you have people who can try and sell you services or, somebody who can come in and make all these promises. But if you're familiar with the work that needs to be done, you can thoroughly vet people that are on your team. You can kind of know if somebody's BSing. You can kind of see, like, hey, do I really need this? Or are they charging too much for this? Or are they over promising with this? Or are they just really trying to like blow smoke and they really don't know what they're talking about? So the fact that I kind of went through and learned these things on my own, it really has allowed me just to have a different lens in certain scenarios versus like being an artist like fresh and new and very naive to a lot of stuff. And it just really gives you a lot of independence and power because it's like, hey, regardless of whatever is going on in the industry, regardless of who wants to work with me or who doesn't, I have this knowledge and I can make it happen on my own. Of course, it is great to work with people because you can just be more effective and get more done. But at the end of the day, it just allows you to be self reliant. And, that knowledge is something that you can share with other people and you can teach, and you're just always going to have.
Interesting, because it sounds like not only does it cover you and allow you to grow your business or grow your brand, but as you kind of mentioned, it allows you to protect yourself, to not get scanned by others, and to
Mhm.
have a clear understanding of, if someone comes to you, you might not be a professional in that certain realms, but at least you know the basic details, right? You kind of like have a
Exactly.
clear understanding of some of the stuff, so you're not totally shocked when someone says something, and then you can kind of know if that's true or not just by understanding some of these small details.
Yeah, because, like even coming up as an artist, I've definitely encountered a lot of people. Like before I really got in on the business side, I encountered so many people, so many different scenarios. And I learned something from each one, but there are definitely so many people who prey on like these independent artists. And a lot of them, you'd be surprised how even like from working as an A&R in music publishing, I realized some of these songwriters who like I look up to, and they've wrote some of these great songs in the past and everything. It's a lot of basic things, a lot of basic knowledge that they're really not aware of. Like some people don't even know what ASCAP or BMI is, or how to register their music, a lot of basic stuff. And there's people in the industry who kind of prey on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a main reason why I've started this podcast, is just for that same reason of trying to understand a little bit of everything in the industry. So you mentioned it's really important to kind of invest yourself in these different areas of the music industry early on, just to understand and get a clear picture of things. So would there be any that you really think are important to invest in early on, if you are an independent, let's say record label, for example, that are very valuable, as you mentioned, like BMI, or things of like artist rights, or whether it be music law, or whether it be some administration things of that, like that? Are there any kind of main ones that you would really suggest to others?
I would definitely say, because it's like, when you're at an independent level, you might not really come into contact with all of the business legal details at first, because stuff is very loose. It's coming together. It's good to know. And as, veteran managers have advised me, like it's good to have your business in order. So there are plenty of books that I, would recommend to get. There's one that's really good. I think it's called All About the Music Industry. It's by Donald Passman. So if you just search that, but I remember in my music industry course, we specifically learned from that book. And even like people in the music industry who are currently working and have been in for a long time have read that book and just use it as a reference guide. There's another book, and I know I'm like screwing up the titles. There's another book. It might be called Plain and Simple Guide to Music Publishing, but I know the cover, it's like black and blue. I can give you these titles later. That would be a good book to read just so you kind of understand how music publishing works. It's also kind of like a way to help you learn how to protect your music, what you have to do after you create it, registering it and stuff like that. I would just kind of go off of those two books because it can kind of give you a bird's eye view and like show you a little bit of knowledge on everything. But to be honest, most of the stuff that I learned is really just from experience and just from being in the mix. Like a book can tell you certain things, but there's nothing like that real world experience and seeing something firsthand to really get it and see how things operate and see how things go. Because even like I went back to Full Sail to get my master's degree, and it was just an entertainment business degree, and it focused on a variety of aspects. It wasn't specifically just on music industry, but a variety of aspects of entertainment, like law, this, that, and the third. And to be honest, like I really didn't feel like it was helpful. Like I went back because after I was, working for the publishing company, like it was really, even though it was an A&R position, it really wasn't paying that much. And I'm like, okay, I'm finally getting my foot in the door, but like, how am I going to sustain myself? Like, I can't live with my mom forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, how am I going to get to that next level? Like, how am I going to break in? Because this is like just the first entryway. So I was like, well, maybe I need to go back to school because, people, it doesn't seem like they're hiring me. And every time I go on interviews, they always ask me about this biology degree. So maybe I should go back to school. So one, I hate college, but I was like, let me find an accelerated program. So Full Sail had an accelerated entertainment business program. So I enrolled in that, and I thought it was really gonna like fill in the blanks of all the stuff that I didn't know. And it really kind of didn't. It taught me the steps to start your own business, which is great. But again, all this stuff you can read books and you can Google online. It really didn't tell me like the nitty gritty of how the music business works, how it operates. All that stuff I really learned from my music publishing job, from my internet radio internship, and from working at a record label. But I would say if you're going to go and do this on your own, reading those two books will be good, just so you can have some background information. And then, like, I mean, you could take the route that I did, just like working. It's kind of like a mentorship. If you work at another company just to see how things go, it's kind of like having a mentor who can advise you and tell you how things go.
Oh, all right. Yeah, plenty to chew on there. But I definitely agree with you. And it sounds like reading and doing your research and becoming knowledgeable on these things is very important. But the experience is very valuable, right? And oftentimes you might have to do jobs that maybe you're not super passionate about, but you want to do them because you want that knowledge. And
Yeah.
maybe you have to do some volunteer jobs or some internships.
Hmm.
And that will kind of help you get those experiences and understand the industry a little bit better.
Yeah.
Now I kind of want to talk about your transition to the West Coast and your move to LA and like kind of what that was like for you because you kind of mentioned earlier you're from New Jersey, you've lived in New York City a bit, but you've kind of recently moved to LA. Like what was that like for you and how was the music industry culture? Was there anything that surprised you or shocked you or how are you feeling about that transition?
That transition from New Jersey to LA was super, super hectic just because of the fact that I was in school at the time. And at first, I was doing really great in school. I was getting all A's, but then I moved halfway through the course in June. And just in that time, it was like, oh my God, like, how am I going to keep up with school and moving and trying to look for a job and, all this other stuff. And I feel like the way my story happened, sometimes like I'm even nervous about telling people because like you just don't want people to get jealous or whatever. But it was really crazy. I saved up my money. I came to LA with my producer, and I'm like, hey, we're just going to make it happen. We don't have any connections. We don't know where we're going to stay. We don't have any jobs. So we moved out there, and I had been networking with people on LinkedIn. So the first night we came, there was this like party at the W Hotel, and I was going to network with these artists just to try and like build connections and figure out who's who. This girl was an artist, but she also like was songwriting and stuff like that. So I was just trying to network and, see what was going on. So that was cool. Then we came out there, we're staying in hotels and I'm looking for jobs and I'm like driving by and I see the Live Nation building and I'm like, oh my God, I would love to work for Rock Nation. So I hopped out in my outfit, my business outfit, and I'm like trying to hand them my resume and no, they didn't let me in. So that didn't necessarily work out. And then I had a job interview that was completely non-music related. And then I got there and realized this is a scam. So then I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna work at Trader Joe's because Trader Joe's is paying like $18 an hour. So let me just go ahead and do that. But for whatever reason, I didn't apply to Trader Joe's yet. So then I think we ended up getting an apartment, but still did not have a job. And then I was in the public assistance office, and it had got to the point where I'm like, okay, well, like, I don't want money to run down. Like, we still need food. So let me try and get like food stamps or something like that. So I'm in there. For whatever reason, they told me that I couldn't get them. And I'm like, all right. So then I left. And mind you, at this point, I did go for the job interview with 10K. Should have said that. Went for the job interview with 10K. At the time when I applied, I didn't even know like who the company was. I just saw the job on LinkedIn or no, on Indeed. And I was like, oh, well, let me apply. They called me, went for a job interview. It seemed cool. And then as I left the public assistance office, it's like a few days later, the lady who had interviewed me called me and was like, oh, you got the job. Literally as I'm leaving the public assistance office. So it was like I came there on June 5th, got my apartment June 15th, and then started my first day at 10K on June 24th. And like literally had nothing lined up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great timing. And that seems like everything kind of fell in line at great time.
It definitely did. And it was like, like a month later, stuff was just changing so much. Like, okay, by August, I'm like at Trippie Redd's album release party. And, like it was so much crazy things. Now I'm like at these Grammy parties and, at this person's birthday party and Wiz Khalifa's like handing me shots. I'm like, what the heck? Like this is like really crazy when you think about how it's done a complete 360. But even still, like I was still in school and trying to maintain school and this new job was definitely really stressful. It was really, really stressful. And I'm just trying to get my bearing, see how things go. And yeah, it was really stressful. It was a lot to learn. And my first few months on the job was definitely turbulent, because I realized like, hey, there's a lot of things that I didn't know. Like maybe like this was really like my first for real industry job. And so there was just a lot of stuff that I needed to know as far as like being an assistant, just professional protocol and stuff like that. Not even so much the industry stuff, just how to operate in a corporate atmosphere you know so
Yeah.
yeah, so that made it really hard, and it was my first time with the A&R admin information, like the spreadsheets and the status reports and how to do this and how to do that, and it was like, okay, I'm picking it up. Boom, I learned how to process invoices and book studios. That was cool. But then I had a dual role. I was the executive assistant and I was the A&R admin coordinator. So it was like I'm trying to find time to balance all these tasks that I need to do, and oh, I have to remember, you have to check up on this and you have to do that and you have to follow up on this. So it was really like tough learning how to balance everything at first, along with being in school.
Wow, yeah, I'm sure that was really difficult, and it sounds like you were kind of thrusted into the chaotic scene in LA, and everything moves so fast. Was there any tactics you learned to use that helped you manage that stress? Was it just a matter of time, or how did you kind of learn to deal with all that stress?
To be honest, it was a long time. Like I probably went through like the whole first year of my job just feeling like, oh my God, I did something wrong. Are they going to fire me? you know, like that's really how it was. And like, okay, it's a newer company. And there were several people there that I realized that were thrown into the fire. Being that it was a newer company, it's like we're trying to get the organization in order. We're trying to figure this all out together. So I wasn't the only one who was just thrown into the position and just had to learn how to swim. That's definitely what it felt like. Everything was just kind of hitting me all at once. And at times it really did get stressful. And I was trying to find ways to manage it. And I really didn't know how. And, it really just I don't it's like you watch TV shows growing up about like, oh, how artists are and stuff like that and how the situation is, but you never really like it's almost like you don't believe it's real. Like sometimes the artists throw fits, sometimes they get upset, sometimes things happen. And just every time you're thinking, like, oh my God, is this going to be it? Am I going to get fired? Oh my God, am I going to be fired? Am I
Yeah.
going to be homeless in LA? Am I going to be fired? Oh my God. So I really was kind of going through feeling this way up until just like a few months ago. And I think the change was that I just kind of realized, like, you know what? I have a lot of value at this company. Like, and they need me, because I'm going above and beyond here, and most people wouldn't be doing this. Like, everybody knows how reliable I am. Artists can call me at 2 a.m. with the issue, you know, with the studio or whatever, and I will answer the phone and try and resolve it. So I think it was more so just realizing my value, and realizing, hey, like people make mistakes. It's not the end of the world. No, you're not going to get fired. And yeah, I think that's what kind of helped me to manage my stress, is just realizing my value, because it's like, okay, if I made a mistake one time compared to all the value that I bring to the table, that's not something that they're going to get rid of me over. And two, just developing a general stress response to my job in general. Like anytime something happens, I used to just automatically get stressed, like, oh my God. So I tried to retrain my brain to think like, okay, look, this is just music at the end of the day. Like that's all we're doing this for is music. Like it's really not that serious. People are coming to me, with these situations, and they're making it seem like it's the end of the world and the sky is going to fall and it's going to blow up, but it's really not that serious, and it's just music and everything will get resolved. And to be honest, I'm not the only person who feels this way. Like I've spoken to other artist managers before, because you do build a big network. But I've spoken to other artist managers and they're like, hey, every time so and so calls me, it's like the end of the world and this is happening and that's happening. And I'm starting to get heart palpitations.
Wow.
And I don't know what it is. Yeah, like even my coworkers, he's new to the position and I trained him and he's on, but he's feeling the same way that I did. Anytime something happens, it's like, oh my God, is this it? Are they gonna fire me? I don't know why it is that way, but I don't know. It's just really hectic. And when I first got hired, my boss told me, she was like, "Oh, have you seen Game of Thrones?" And I'm like, no. And she's like, okay, well, I want you to watch every season of Game of Thrones. And I'm like, okay. She's like, because that's how the music industry is. She's like, as soon as, you get to your spot and you think you're good and secure, somebody's coming to chop your head off and take your spot. And it really has been kind of like that. I've had to learn to watch my back and operate and watch what you say and just watch how you move and learn to cover your ass. So it can really be treacherous, you know? So it's like you have to keep that balance of being cordial, being friendly, but also, you know, paying attention to the situation, watching things, cover your ass. However, when you operate in your job, the main thing is cover your ass, cover your ass, cover your ass, because shit will hit the fan. It'll be a late night email. Something happens, somebody's in trouble, and everybody is just trying to point the finger and point the blame. And you got to come with those receipts, you know?
Yeah.
So it doesn't get on you. And, sometimes it will. And then you just have to own up and accept accountability and move on.
Okay, yeah. So it is a lot of knowing that you've been through things before, and then knowing how to kind of, as you say, cover your own ass because
Mhm.
you've been through it. And then once you kind of go through those situations or those stressful times a few times, you kind of become a little bit more aware that it's not the end of the world, and that, like, you will be okay and you'll be able to learn from it. And then on top of that, just understanding, as you said, your value. I like how you said that, because you did get hired to that position because someone believed in you. Someone saw that,
Mhm.
okay, this person can do this job effectively. So that
Mhm.
is important to keep in your mind and keep that going forward.
And I think a lot of it was, I think they call it the imposter syndrome. I'm not exactly sure, but when I first applied for that job, it was on Indeed as an administrative assistant company. No, an administrative assistant position. I wasn't really aware of the company and like the caliber of the artists. So I'm thinking like, okay, I'm applying for an administrative assistant job. That's what I know how to do. That's what I feel comfortable with. When I got hired, my boss told me, oh, okay, well, you're going to be the executive assistant and you're going to be the A&R admin coordinator. I knew nothing about A&R admin. And obviously, an executive assistant is way higher than just an administrative assistant. So already I was coming in feeling inferior, like, okay, well, this is not the job that I applied for. Like, can I do this? Because I knew what I felt comfortable doing. This is above that, you know? So already I was just kind of like feeling inferior. And I think maybe just that negative energy and that inferiority complex was causing little mishaps and things and bumps in the road to happen. Um, so like I said, once I started to realize my value, things started to get a lot smoother. And I recently actually got promoted. So now I am the manager of the A&R admin department. And to be honest, that promotion really also helped me manage my stress because it kind of had me think like, okay, well, if I wasn't doing a good job or if they wanted to fire me, they're not going to promote me, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it was a lot of my promotion and just realizing my value that kind of helped me with that stress, but it's still going to be stressful,
Yeah.
you know?
A little
Stuff is
fake
still
it
going to
till you make
happen.
it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think what the one thing I would say that if you're in this type of situation, regardless of what position you're in, just kind of go in with your head held high, like feel like you're supposed to be there, feel like you belong, feel like you got this, and that will just be helpful.
That's very good advice. And congratulations to you for your promotion.
Thank
And
you.
I think we kind of brushed over 10K a little bit, but as you've mentioned, you are working at 10K Projects, which is an independent label based out of LA. Can you
Mhm.
talk about the label a little bit and what the focus is for the label and kind of what the environment is like working there?
Sure. 10K Projects is an independent label founded by Elliot Grange. We're just really like growing, growing, growing. Really just making a great impact in the music industry. I would say they kind of started out and their niche was like SoundCloud rappers, and that's you know kind of where they grew their basis at. We've gone through a lot of roster changes, but right now, most notably, we have Trippy Red. We've expanded into like pop artists. So we have Surfaces, Salem Elise, Quinn NFN, a whole bunch of people. And it's really growing. Internet Money is also involved with 10K. So they're doing a lot of great things right now. And yeah, I would just say it started out with that kind of like SoundCloud underground niche like rappers who are also into like rock and rock elements and anime and stuff like that. And not like I said, we've expanded into pop, but I feel like in my opinion, that's really like where the core is.
That's really interesting to me because I grew up in that kind of SoundCloud era of
Mhm.
like hearing of artists when they only have 1,000 followers or something, and then all of a sudden their songs get a million plays. And
Mhm.
it seems like a really recent development in the music industry, right? We didn't have SoundCloud 2 decades ago, uh,
Mhm.
where these artists were having to kind of get groomed by a huge record label. So it sounds like 10K is really focused on that new generation of artists, that new generation of music as a whole, and finding that talent early and kind of utilizing them, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely.
So you've kind of mentioned a little bit about your job and what you do, but maybe could you break down what it is like doing administration at an indie label and what your job kind of entails on a day to day?
Sure. So sometimes a lot of people get this mixed up. There is the A&R department, but there's also A&R admin. So A&R goes out and they find the artists. They also are kind of involved in their careers to some extent. And then the A&R admin handles all of the stuff on the back end. So whenever artists need studios, the manager or the A&R or whoever reaches out to the A&R admin, and then we have to then go book the studios, keep track of the costs and everything. If a project or a single is coming about, the A&R admin kind of facilitates the producer clearances, the mixer agreements, the side artist clearances, the sample clearances, and we just keep track of the costs and the budgets for the whole thing. If there's like recording related travel, we have to book that. If there's just any issues that arise under the scope of these things, we have to handle it. We manage the splits. We keep track of the progress of, the album. We try and get things cleared in a in a good amount of time before the release. We have to type the credits, we have to process all of the payments, and when you say it like that, it seems really simple, but when you're managing a roster of artists that's continuously growing, and even one artist, like Trippy Red might put out like 4 projects a year, and then his mixtapes have like they have like 20 something songs on them,
Yeah.
so you have to think like each song it has at least one producer, but each song could have like 2 or 3 producers on it. It could have some features on it, it could have some samples. So there's a lot that goes into even just one song, and then a lot of times you have to wrangle these people down and try and find their information just so the credits can be correct. It's definitely a lot. So just imagine doing that for every song, for every artist that comes out. And, there are deadlines. We have to kind of get these things done before the release date. And then, your marketing might be asking you for things, publishing companies might be asking you for things, sample companies might be asking you for things. On top of this, you got to book a studio for each of the artists. And, prior to COVID, now things are kind of like getting back to normal. But prior to COVID, artists are recording every single day. So trying to find a studio that's available in LA, and sometimes the artist might hit you up last minute, that can be stressful as well because you're like, oh my God, they want to record. I need to hurry and get something. And you're just calling around, trying to book a studio, trying to see what's available on top of the other things that you have to get done.
Yeah.
On top of doing things for the president of the company. So it's like that's what I have to do for A&R admin. But as far as the president of the company, I would have to, do things for her, which would mainly involve like operations, setting up new systems at the company, financial stuff like that. So I mean, me personally, just because I was also the executive assistant, I kind of would just help with everything. If people needed something, like someone literally texted me before and was like, with something that didn't really have to do with me, and I let them know that, and they're like, "Oh, well, I'm just texting you because you're the one who like gets things resolved," you know.
Yeah.
So I just kind of help wherever I'm needed, but mainly that's what my role is as far as admin goes.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like your plate is quite full and you deal with a lot of stuff, especially a lot of that back end stuff. I think people don't
Hmm.
really think about all that work that goes in to crediting people for the right songs and getting those rights and getting those studios booked to create songs. I don't think
Exactly.
that's really focused on it, and people don't really think about that.
Exactly. And like we liaise with a lot of people. So we liaise with the publishers and they come to us to make sure the splits are correct. We liaise with the sample company just so they have the correct information. We have to let the attorneys and the managers know, like, hey, this song is no longer coming out anymore, or we're pushing this release date back, just so they can know how to go about their clearance process as far as getting the agreements done. So we always have to be on it. We have to be proactive as far as like, oh, well, we heard so and so was about to be releasing a project. Let's, be proactive and request a budget from their team just so we can make sure that it's approved. We do have to be very organized, very accurate, and just keep track of things because we are the ones who keep track of the album budgets and stuff like that. So if the expenses aren't in order, that pretty much like, okay, the label keeps track of how much the artist spends, and then that goes against how much the song makes, so
Yeah.
we just have to keep track of all those things, and it needs to be super accurate and super organized because all of these budgets are laid out in their agreements, and that kind of depends on whether the artist recoups or not. It depends on their advances, this, that, and the third, and their royalties. So if we make a mistake, it's not good.
Yeah, yeah. You definitely want to have your all your bases covered there. It's interesting you talk about connecting all these different people and working with a bunch of different people.
Hmm.
I'm sure you use like communication tactics to deal with them because trying to communicate with the artist, I'm sure, is a lot different than communicating with their manager.
Hmm.
How do you deal with speaking and communicating with all these different people, and like what have you learned in this role in regards to communication?
It's definitely good to build relationships with people. You'll speak to people on email, but it's definitely good to get their phone number and text them about things or speak to them over the phone. Sometimes for me, I feel like it's just easier to call people. So if I'm emailing about something or an issue is going on, I might just pick up the phone and call the person. And that kind of helps to let them know who I am, my personality, like my energy, how I operate. And that just kind of like builds a connection from there. So yeah,
Okay.
like I do have a lot of relationships with a lot of people, and generally, it's just, you keep it positive and friendly because you never know where you're going to connect with somebody down the line, or where you might need them, or where they might need you. There are some situations where, okay, you're on an email and somebody's getting a little bit snappy, so you have
Yeah.
to learn how to handle that as well, and that's not something that I always knew how to handle. There are situations where an artist manager might be yelling at you on the phone
Oh,
because there's an issue, and you have to learn how to handle that as well. Sometimes as the admin, you might get blamed for things that are not necessarily your fault or not necessarily under your control. You end up being like the bad guy. So if something if something goes wrong, people think, oh, it's this person's fault or it's this person that did it. No, actually, I'm just the messenger. Some of this stuff might be coming from higher up or whatever, but I'm like taking the grunt of it. So you kind of have to learn how to, sometimes, like I said, you have to learn how to check people a little bit. Like I
yeah.
actually had a situation with one of the artist managers, and they were yelling at me on the phone about something that was completely outside of my control. And my producer actually heard it, and he was like getting upset, like, don't let him talk to you like that. And I'm just like, okay, well, but I don't know what to do. So he told me what to say. And I said it, and I didn't say anything crazy, but I let him know, like, okay, I don't know why you're yelling at me, because this is something that is outside of my control, and I don't appreciate you talking to me like that. And all I had to do was say that. And ever since then, this person has never talked to me in that way. They've always been super respectful. And even if they feel like they're starting to teeter on the line of, okay, I'm getting a little bit disrespectful, they apologize. So that's something that, you're going to have to learn, because it does happen. People can be condescending on emails to, the administrative people. So
And you have to learn how to defuse those situations.
you do. And you have to learn how to defuse the situations. You have to learn how to stand up for yourself. You also have to learn the boundary of being cool with people, being friendly, but don't let it get to the point where it makes it difficult to do business. Because sometimes, you might get cool with an artist attorney, or you guys might be friendly, but then if you need to come to them and be like, hey, things aren't moving fast enough, and it's starting to, make me look bad because I have to report to someone as well. And, you're not moving fast enough with this, like, what's going on? And if you guys have had like a cool buddy buddy relationship, it's almost like, okay, well, now they don't take you serious. And it's almost a little bit uncomfortable to say something to them now because it's like, oh, damn, like I don't want to like come down on my friend, but it's just business. So it's like it's a thin line between keeping things professional, keeping things friendly, standing up for yourself. So
Yeah.
it's just always things you have to consider. But yeah, it is cool. You do meet a lot of people and build a lot of connections. Somebody actually just reached out to me too. Someone from a recording studio reached out to me and just kind of asked for advice because they're interviewing for some A&R and management positions. So it's like people are moving around, you never know. So it's best to be nice to everybody, be respectful, but if you got to check somebody, you got to check them.
Okay, yeah, you gotta learn that fine line, and I'm sure with time and experiences, you kind of learn that. You weren't
Hmm.
probably not good at that immediately when you started the job, but now
No, I
you
wasn't.
do know kind of how to walk that line.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting that you kind of just brought up the hiring. I know you've mentioned this to me in our conversation before, where you started recording here. You do a lot of interviewing and training for new people at the label. So,
Hmm.
what are some of the main things you would suggest for someone trying to get a job or trying to be successful in an interview?
I would say is just one, if you're applying for the job, just constantly be looking. Always have your eyes open, be on LinkedIn, Indeed, all the job boards, and just always have your resume ready and apply. Constantly be paying attention to the keywords that are in some of these job postings and kind of like, put them in your resume or figure out what they are and try and learn them just so, your resume comes off more appealing. But I would say definitely always be professional. There have been times where I don't even know how, but it was a job and we were hiring. Somebody got my cell phone number. I don't know how they got my number, but they called me and it was really off-putting. Like I didn't like that. I felt like they violated my personal space. Other people might feel differently about this, but this is just how I felt. I felt like they violated my personal space. People have somehow found my personal email and emailed me. Again, I felt like they violated my personal space. And this is stuff that I used to do when I was trying to break into the industry. I never called anybody on their cell phone. Well, actually, I did. Crazy enough, I called Master P on his cell phone and he answered.
Wow.
Yeah. But that's another story. But yeah, this is stuff that I used to do before I got in. And then now I'm on the opposite end. I realized like, hey, that I didn't really like that. That kind of felt like this person violated my personal space. And then the person that did call me, I checked out their resume and they had a whole bunch of typos. It was just looking crazy. And I'm like, so you did all that. And then I go check out your resume because you got my attention now. And then like your stuff is not even together, you know?
Yeah.
So I would just say always be professional. If you want to follow up on something, feel free to message the job poster or somebody on LinkedIn. If you like do research on the company and you realize who's working there and you just apply for a job, feel free to message one of the employees on LinkedIn and let them know like, hey, my name is so and so. Nice to meet you. I recently applied for a job. Excuse me. I recently applied for a job there. I just wanted to see if you mind checking out my resume, or do you have any tips or advice, or is there any way you can recommend me? Just a quick, succinct, professional, polite LinkedIn message is enough. If you find somebody's work email, you can even follow up and do that. But I think LinkedIn is fine. I feel best about LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But so again, it's like the thin line between being persistent and going after what you want versus like being annoying.
Yeah. Keeping that professionality there, yet at the
Oh,
same time, kind of finding those avenues of contacting people.
exactly. And then once you get into the interview, I would say what has helped me for my interviews is I prepare, prepare, prepare. Some people may think that I over prepare for interviews, but that's just what allows me to feel confident and just put my best foot forward. So I'll go on Google and look up like top interview questions. And I'll write down those interview questions and also think about the position and just kind of prepare my answers to these questions based off of whatever the position is that I'm interviewing for. And that has kind of helped me because then I can go in, I'm confident. When they ask me questions, I'm not rambling all over the place because I've already wrote down my answers, I've rehearsed it. if I'll go back and look at the job description and see certain things that are on there that they want, and if it's something that I don't know, I'm going to research it, I'm going to learn how to do it so that I can talk confidently about it. And it's like, hey, you got to do what you got to do to get your foot in the door, you know.
So you got to
So
like really prepare for that interview, and it's kind of the same as applying for the job. You got to prepare to apply for the job and then know who to contact and how to contact them once you applied.
exactly. And I think one thing that allows me to stand out in my interviews is, one, okay, right now I'm talking to you. I'm not talking in my, hey, Vinny, how are you? You know, da 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 da. I'm not talking in my happy, friendly voice. I'm talking to you because I'm like thinking about the information, you know. So if I'm on a job interview, I'm going to speak like this. I'm not going to speak like, yeah, if I'm on a job interview, I'm going to speak like this, you know.
Yeah.
So there's a certain way that you have to speak to come off as confident, and to have people feel like you know what you're talking about. I would say that speaking that way is more effective than the latter. I've noticed the difference in that. Rehearsing your questions so you know what you're talking about, you come off as succinct. Make eye contact with the person. Dress professionally, make sure you look professional, make sure you know you look good. Have your resume printed out. That may be a little bit old school, but still have it printed out, ready to go. Make it a nice presentation. Be personable, have good energy, have personality, because people don't really like to work with somebody who's like, you know, boring or has like no personality. I don't know about other places, but in the music industry, that's something that's also a part of the interview. Like, even if you are qualified, but like you kind of seem like an asshole or you seem like somebody that people don't want to be around, that's kind of going to count as a strike against you.
Yeah, be likable.
Exactly. One thing that I feel like has me stand out after my interviews is I write a thank you note, you know, and I have it after the interview. I write a thank you note. I put some specific points in there about the person, about the interview, and I mail it to the company immediately after my interview. And I feel like that has been very helpful in me getting jobs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I've never thought about that, but I'm sure
Hmm.
that puts that extra step, right? That at least they're thinking about you because they have to read it. They have to open it and see your name.
Yeah, it definitely does. For my music publishing job, it was a group interview. So every person who was working there was a part of the interview, and they all interviewed me at once, and asked me questions. So as soon as I left the job, I had thank you notes for every single person who was there. I remembered all their names, and I remembered something specific about what they told me, or, you know, their specific character. And I put that in the notes, and they all remembered them. Even after I had been working there for months, they all still had their thank you notes. Some of them were like, "Oh, this is the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me," you know. So that just further adds into you being likable. They're showing you're paying attention, and you go that extra mile. So I think that helped me get that job as well. On top of just, you know, my experiences and speaking confidently about that, but definitely the thank you notes.
Okay, yeah. So it sounds like it. If you use these methods to stand out, you're way more likely to get the job.
Hmm.
Excellent. That's great. I don't have any more questions written down for you. Is there anything else you feel like we could add, or maybe we didn't touch on enough and you kind of want to talk about a little bit more?
There was the question earlier on where you were asking me like, what should people focus on? And then also, just when it comes to, you know, looking for a job in the industry, say you're not an artist, but you want to be in the music industry, you want to be involved, there are tons of different avenues that people can take. And it's not necessarily advertised. Like at a record label, you have the marketing department. So there's a creative person, there's a creative director, there's somebody who I guess will be a project manager who's in charge of the releases, the release dates, getting all the assets together. There's the creative person who goes out and finds locations, who finds videographers, photographers, and stuff, you know, to kind of help put the project assets together. There is a graphic designer. There's in the production department, there is the production manager, and they're kind of involved with scheduling. So they collect all the assets from the project manager and the marketing department. They upload it to a system and then they send it to the distributor. There's me, I'm the admin person. I book the studios. There is a legal and business affairs department. There is a general operations department. There's H&R. There's publicity. There are also internships. And then, like I said, you can work at a distribution company. You can work at an attorney's office. There's just like so many different ways and so many different avenues that you can be involved. And then, I mean, you could just be an artist manager yourself and manage artists who have record deals and just kind of get involved that way. You can work at a recording studio. You can work in music publishing as an A&R or one of the admin people. There's also business managers who work with labels, and there's a royalty department. So there's just tons of jobs out there and tons of avenues that you can just get involved in. But I feel like where you have to start is figure out what you like and what you're good at and what your talents are. And then you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking as you're kind of mentioning all those jobs. There's a lot of possibilities for different people with different interests to kind of find positions they like. So
Mhm.
would you have any suggestions of how someone might find what they like to do, or which one of these positions that they would succeed in?
I would say get involved. Just get involved. Start doing some internships, start researching, start watching interviews of like music industry moguls or, people who are known in the industry and kind of just listening to what they say and see what piques your interest. You can also get involved in like live events and stuff like that, live events and touring in sync. There's also like, music supervision and stuff like that. So, yeah, I would just kind of get involved with any projects that are going on in your town, with independent artists, see if you can help them out in some type of way, like with what they're doing. So then you can kind of see, like, hey, you know what? I'm doing this thing and I really like it. And then, yeah, you can kind of figure out like what that job is called or what that direction would be. And then you can go from there. So, just really like, oh, and internet radio as well, and then regular radio. Like there's literally so many aspects. So I would
Yeah.
say get involved, watch movies, talk to people, watch interviews. But you really don't know if you like something until you get involved. Like I said, when I was in high school, I thought, oh well, I guess I can go to college for biology since I'm really good at it. And because I was good at biology, I got recommended for honors chem. But then when I got into college and started doing college level biology, I realized I hate this.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to do music. So you really don't know if you like something until you get involved. So that's what I would say. Try and get involved in as many different things as possible, network, meet people, and then you can kind of know what you feel passionate about, what speaks to you, what you're willing to do, even when, shit hits the fan or you have a tough day or you get yelled at or you get in trouble, because you're definitely going to need that. Being in the music industry is not for the faint of heart. You're going to have some grit and some mental strength to keep going because it's going to get tough. It's very rewarding, you know, pre-COVID times when you can actually do things.
Yeah.
Because you get to go to different events, you get to be around artists. It's a lot of like fun and glitz and glam. But there are also some really tough days. There are some really long days. There are some really long hours. You're working a lot of overtime late at night. Sometimes you might not be getting that much sleep, or the artist has this going on, or it's a lot of different scenarios that can make it very, very tough on a person. So you have to find that thing that really speaks to you and that you're willing to put yourself through all the tough times because you love it so much.
Think that's really inspirational. Those experiences will help people, really figure themselves out and
Hmm.
learn, okay, maybe I don't like doing this, but I met this person that has this job and I can kind of pursue that path. So, as you mentioned, there's highs in the music industry and then there's lows. And you
Yeah,
kind of have to ride with that. And ultimately, it sounds like if you're passionate, just like you've kind of explained, that's what will carry you through, and that's what
hmm,
will kind of help you deal with all these stresses and all the stuff that can be negative in the music industry.
exactly. And I mean, like I said, it balances out. Sometimes I think like, oh well, what if I just had a regular job? Like what if I was selling car insurance or something like that?
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, hey, working at this record label, I get these perks. Like I said, pre-COVID times, I'm going to parties and going to Grammy parties and going to concerts and this, that, and getting free t-shirts, and I get to look cool. And like it's just so many cool things. Right now I'm like about to get a plaque and everything. Sometimes you get to hang out with the artists and stuff like that. But just working at a record label in general, we also get more time off than the regular job. So we get our vacation time, but most record labels and like companies in the music industry, they shut down during the fourth quarter. So they get like a significantly longer holiday break than working at a regular job. So like we get off for every holiday and we get a 3-week holiday break on top of our vacation time. So I'm like, sometimes this can be really stressful, but I got it good.
Okay, yeah. I'm sure those vacations really help with the stress. That's probably could have been mentioned when we were talking about that earlier. So
Yeah. And you know what? It's like I said, again, I keep talking about the stress, and it is, but it's like once the project comes out that you've been working on and that you've been stressing out about and going through all this stuff, it feels really good. And you feel really proud, like, wow, I had something to do with that, you know?
yeah, absolutely.
So that's what it's really all about.
Awesome. Well, Amber, I think that wraps up this episode of Behind the Pulse. I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing all your wisdom and all the things you've learned with me. I think you've explained a lot of really important things in the music industry, not only pertaining to your personal side and dealing with the stresses and learning how to interview and things like that, but also what it is like behind the scenes at the label and kind of all the things that go into creating music that I don't think people think about very often. So thank you very much for coming on and talking with me.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. That wraps up another episode of Behind the Pulse. Vinnycamo here signing off. Before you go, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel here. Look down in the description of this video. You'll be able to find all the links on how to find Amber as well as myself. Stay tuned because I got another episode coming to you very soon. Peace.